When you put high performers under more pressure and more stress, they will perform, but at what cost? Because it's not sustainable.
Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of the Resilient Lounge. Today I have Katie Maycock from Get Your Shit Together, and I'm going to let her introduce herself because the title is actually inspiring and a little bit long, but here we go.
Thank you so much. So I work with organizations, leaders, teams, helping them manage their stress to drive performance, increase profitability within the organization.
There you go. You see, I don't think I could have said that. I love how you basically title everything saying how you can manage your shit and avoid burnout or get your shit together. I love how you just bring that word into everything.
Everything.
What inspired you?
So, good question. Fun fact, I used to work in recruitment. So I worked in recruitment about 10, 15 years ago. And even prior to that, I was created set foundations and habits and created a situation where I was destined to burn out. So I've actually managed to burn out twice myself. The first time I had no idea what was going on. I kept going to the doctors and they're like, oh, you're just stressed, like stress less. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, of course I'm stressed. Like I'm unwell, but also like stress actually has driven me to perform better. I was a top performer in recruitment. So I never really saw it as a problem. I'm like, no, just fix my physical health because I was having so many issues with my physical health. That was the first time. The second time round, I was out for the count. Like I was so unwell. And I was laying in bed one day and I was trying to read an email and I couldn't make sense of the email.
Really?
And I had a cold sore all up my face. I couldn't concentrate. I had anxiety, like there was nothing else. And I was having panic attacks every day. And I remember just sitting there thinking to myself, I was like, you have to get your shit together. You have to get your shit together. And at this stage, I had really bad gut health issues. And so then I was like, dude, you got to get your shit together, literally and figuratively. And so that's how the business came about. And every day as I was getting better, I was like, okay, Katie, just get your shit together. Let's get your shit together. So that's how the business name came about.
And I love it because it actually sticks as well. It resonates with other people. So like when you tell them get your shit together, it's, oh yeah, I need to get my shit together, literally.
It's just a little slap to the face.
It
just
is.
a small one.
Yeah, it's a little one. All right, so you were in recruitment. Very stressful job.
Yeah.
Highly stressful. What kind of recruitment were you doing? What industry?
So I was working in the medical device industry, recruiting sales people for medical device companies.
Okay. And were you doing a 360 role?
Yep, 360. I came into the position with the iciest cold desk you could possibly have. And it was my first job. I'd never worked in, before that I'd ran my own business. So I'd never worked in like corporate before. I'd never done like corporate sales. I mean, I ran my own business, so that's a bit different. But yeah, I had an icy cold desk.
Okay.
Icy cold.
Okay, so walk me through the transition. You moved to London.
Yep.
Did you grow up here?
No. So I was born in the UK and then my parents were like, the grass will be greener in Australia. So when I was 2 years old and moved over to Australia, I didn't get to the UK until 2018.
Okay.
And so I didn't actually do recruitment in the UK. I did recruitment in Australia.
Oh, I've heard it's crazy down there.
Crazy.
In recruitment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's from my understanding, because I work with recruitment companies, because sometimes I need to get their shit together. I like hearing how they do it. I'm like, that is so different to what we did in Australia. It's just, it's a little bit less cowboy-ish, but it's for me, from my understanding, most people are doing 360 roles in Australia. I didn't realize there was a separation. I didn't know that. So in Australia, most recruitment companies, from when I was working there, it was all 360.
Okay. So you were there and then you moved back here to the UK.
So when I was at uni, I actually set up my first business. So I was running a business when I was running a nutrition business as I was finishing off my nutrition degree.
Okay.
When I was still at university, which is a bit cheeky, but I did it anyway. And that boomed. So I was working full time, going to uni full time, doing a double degree. I had to hire people. We like franchised out. Like we did really well. But then I made a really bad business decision and realized I had no idea how to run a business. Like I was still at uni and I was doing a degree in nutrition and physiology. Nowhere do they teach you how to run a business. So I made a really bad mistake, pretty much signed my business over to somebody and was like, walked away with nothing. And I was like, okay, crap, I need to figure out what to do. So I ended up going I was like, maybe I'll be good at sales because I did really well in my business. Maybe I'll be really good at sales. Started going to like job interviews for sales. And then as everyone does, I fell into recruitment. They're like, oh, you'd be really good at recruitment, going to recruitment. So that was around 23, 24. So that's how old I was when I entered recruitment.
So you felt burnt out, and that's when you decided, I'm done with recruitment.
Yeah.
I'm going to basically focus on
get your shit together. Yes. So I worked in recruitment because it might be easier to explain this. I burnt out the first time in recruitment, took 8 months out because I was really unwell, re-entered recruitment with the same company with a promotion and had to move states, and then burnt out again within 6 months.
Wow.
And then at that point I was like, I'm done with the recruitment. I was really sick at that stage. I don't even think I ended up having to move back home, move back in with my mum, and just get my shit together.
Yeah.
Had a couple of like little part-time jobs just to build my own, to build it up.
Okay.
I then ended up moving to Vancouver, working in a crazy sales job, opening up a luxury gym, the first luxury gym in Vancouver, like working anywhere between 12 to 18 hour days. And that was the moment I realized I have a really big issue with stress, as in I find it really addictive and I don't know it's doing me damage until I start seeing physical symptoms. And I started seeing physical symptoms. I quit that job, quit that, and I moved to Costa Rica to really spend some time going, okay, I have so much corporate experience. I have so much sales experience, but I keep burning out. And I know I'm not the only one. I know I'm not the only one that has these bad tendencies, these bad habits, and live in that hustle culture. Right. And so I was like, I'm going to bridge the gap between what I was doing with my nutrition business and bridge that with what I'm doing here. And so I built Get Your Shit Together with the idea of we're going to focus on the 3 pillars. And so that's how Get Your Shit Together came about. And so I must have been around like 30, 31 at that stage.
Okay. So what is burnout? Because there are misconceptions about burnout.
Yes.
So walk us through that. What is burnout?
So burnout is essentially physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion from prolonged stress. It's not just from, oh, I'm a little bit stressed today, I must be burnt out. No, vastly different. It takes months, if not years, to fully burn out. But it's that physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion. So stress will impact you physically, so you might get a little bit tired, but it might not hit you with your emotions, and it might not hit you with your mental. And when we're talking about mental here, we're talking about cognitive fortitude. So we're talking about focus, concentration, and things like that. It might not hit those things, but that's essentially what burnout is. Okay,
but how does it start, and how do you identify burnout?
So this is the hard part, right? A lot of the time, so now it's a diagnosable syndrome. So it became a diagnosable syndrome in 2019. So when I burnt out, it was definitely not 2019. It was definitely way before that. And we didn't really have a saying, like there wasn't really something that you could go, oh, that's burnout. Don't get me wrong, burnout's been around. It was actually originally coined in 1976. So it's been around for quite some time, but the World Health Organization didn't make it diagnosable until 2019. It's really difficult to diagnose because at the end of the day, burnout is the destination. So by the time you've burnt out, you are going to have physical health issues. So we're looking at, some of them can be vague, some of them can be really clear. So for instance, fatigue is definitely going to be 100% one. There's going to, and it's not just fatigue, I'm a little bit tired today. It's like bone weary, I don't even think I can get out of bed to make a cup of coffee kind of fatigue. Oh. Like it's like the fatigue that kind of hurts.
But not depression.
So depression can be a little bit of a part of burnout. So I think it might be easy if we talk about the 6 stages to burnout, because that might be really easy to understand. Burnout's a destination, there's a journey that precedes it. Mm-hmm. So stage 1 of burnout is excitement. And normally at that stage, you're physically, mentally, and emotionally feeling completely fine. You're very excited. So think about a time when maybe you've just started a job, maybe you've just entered recruitment, maybe you've gotten a new job in recruitment, whatever it is, you're really excited, you have all the energy. At that stage, what's happening is you're changing your habits. So you might be choosing to sacrifice your sleep. You might be not going to the gym. You might not be eating healthy. You might be not having enough downtime. You might be choosing to work harder to make sure you can achieve your goal. And that's the thing, the sales roles, it's not really a 9-to-5 job. It's definitely a job that can go longer than that.
Of course.
Stage 2 is what I call working harder. You might have achieved a lot in stage 1 by doing some unsustainable habits or removing all the good habits. but you're having to physically, mentally, and emotionally just put more effort in to get the same results that you were getting in stage 1. Again, not sustainable because you're trying to continue doing what you're doing with unsustainable habits. Enter stage 3 is what we would call frustration. And so this is when we're starting to see the little cracks to show. So everyone's seeing it. So physically, you're starting to feel a bit tired. You're making really simple mistakes. So things that you wouldn't have been doing before, just maybe because you're starting to reduce that concentration, reduce that focus. So you're making really easy mistakes. You're being a little bit more forgetful. But then it's the emotional side that's kicking in at this stage. So most people at this stage will be either they might have gone from being cool, calm, and collected to being outwardly frustrated at smaller things that you used to maybe not get frustrated at. Or you might be somebody who is starting to withdraw. So maybe you were really outgoing, really bubbly, maybe being really engaged, being a little bit more withdrawn from social settings or even at work. But that's when outside people are starting to notice there's something not quite right. And you're probably starting to see your performance dip a little bit at this stage. Stage 4 is when it gets really dicey. So stage 4 is what I call illness and anxiety. And so this is when the physical health symptoms start to really present themselves. So you might be getting really vague inflammatory issues. So this can come out in skin, it can come out in joints, it can come out in any different parts of the body. So this is we're seeing inflammation throughout the body. You might notice that your guts, you're having poor gut health. Also, what's happening at this stage is that you're going from being a little bit overwhelmed and a little bit stressed to actually starting to have a bit of anxiety. Okay. So it's a bit different there. And then obviously mentally as well, when you don't feel great, when you're a little bit more anxious, it's really hard to focus and concentrate and get things done. I would say if you were a top performer, this is when your performance is really dipping right now.
Yeah.
Stage 5 is apathy. This is where the depression kicks in.
Okay.
Apathy it's not like you don't care. It's just you don't have the capacity to care. I could not care less. Yeah. It's when I don't even care what I look like. I don't care about this client. I do not care about this candidate. I just don't care. Because you just don't have the capacity to, because you're so overwhelmed. Yeah. And that's really scary for a lot of people, because I work with a lot of high achievers, and a lot of the times when they get to that, they're like, I don't know how I've gotten here. I was so driven, so goal orientated.
How does one get there though?
Because they're not managing their stress. They're not putting the good habits in place. Stress is one of those things that is so insidious, it can sneak up on you. And especially, this is where high achievers, and this is what happened to me, is that stress has served a really good purpose to actually help you get to that high performer. It's helped you achieve what you want to achieve. So there's this whole process in your mind where you're looking at, but I've gotten to so much success from that. And that was the part that I never really understood. Yeah, but when I'm stressed, I perform really well. And so I achieve my targets. I hit those. I'm the top salesperson. Yes, I'm exceeding all my targets. And so you can't see any other way than working under that amount of stress. And this is where the dilemma comes in, because when we get to management, when you put high performers under more pressure and more stress, they will perform, but at what cost? Because it's not sustainable. And that's why we are having to see the changes of management. In the last 10 years, we've seen how people have to manage, especially sales teams, is changing, because you can't just you can't run a sales team by fear anymore. You can't run a sales team with high pressure constantly and expect them to perform consistently.
I think the olden days kind of sales floor,
boiler room,
Wall Street kind of boiler room sales floor has ended. Not so much. But everyone nowadays is more into the mental health and I need to feel good in order to perform. Sales floors are not the same like they were 5 to 10 years ago. No. When I used to work in HR and I was in the FX industry, the sales floors were insane, right? Insane. And obviously now it's nothing like that. So there's been a shift, but everyone nowadays is saying, oh, I feel burnt out. Oh, I'm burnt out. Oh, I'm this. Specifically Gen Z.
The most Gen Z, it's so interesting. So Gen Z and millennials are the people that sort of report burnout the most.
Yes.
And there's so many reasons for that. If we go with, I'm a millennial, I came into work as a millennial. So I came in with pure fear that I was just grateful to have a job and that I should go beyond what they're telling me I should go. I should work beyond my spec and stuff like that. And I took that literally. So I did do that. Sales is one of those roles though, where the more effort you put in, the more you're going to get out. That's just a fact. Now you can put better effort in to get better results and less, you don't have to burn yourself out. But there's so much that goes into burnout. So something that you've got to understand is that although the World Health Organization says it's physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion from prolonged stress that happens in the workplace. I'm paraphrasing it to say that word for word, but pretty much they're saying it's only the stress that happens in the workplace. I don't know about you, but work is just one stress for me. There's stress in all different areas of
That's what I was going to ask you.
Life.
Can burnout just happen because of work?
No.
Or is it life in general?
It's life in general. And we think about the Gen Zs. So millennials, you think about the millennials. You've got to look at what happened generationally to us. So we've gone through 2 recessions or 3 recessions. We had that global financial crisis as we were entering the workplace. So we lived in this, it was really hard to get a job. So we would work harder, all that kind of stuff. Let's get to Gen Zs now. So Gen Zs are in a really interesting situation. Whereas maybe we could talk about maybe they don't have as much resilience. Maybe they've grown up in the era of take care of your mental health and all that kind of stuff. Because we are in such a weird situation where we grew up in the sort of the boiler room, but now take care of your mental health. And
it's very confusing.
What do you mean?
In school, is while you were growing up, is work hard, study hard.
Yeah.
This was our thing. And I think generations before that. And as now it's, yes, they do study hard, but it's my mental health comes first.
Yeah, and I think there is an element, but we've also got to take into consideration, I grew up without social media. I grew up with not getting, if I got bullied at school, I'd get home and I'd be safe. People weren't like as vicious as they were when we were kids. Gen Zs have grown up in a completely different world. They've grown up with social media, so they're constantly having this information overload. I would say they've been put in situations that we weren't. The bullying that they've experienced would be vastly different to the bullying that we experienced. Their ability to enter the job market was vastly different to how we had the opportunity to get into the job market. I also think if you think about it from this perspective, where we were taught work hard and you'll get places. And at the end of the day, that's true, but also this is the first time in history, from my understanding, that we've got 4 generations in the workplace. Before, it might have only been 2 or 3. So you've got boomers still in the workplace, you've got Gen Xers in the workplace, you've got millennials in the workplace, and you've got Gen Z in the workplace. So Gen Z are being told work really hard and you can get what? You can't really get promoted. What's the point? Like, they're not getting that additional, there's no real carrot for them. Sales is a bit different. But in saying that, there's less sort of rewards in that way, if we look at it just from a company standpoint. But also, what they want out of life is vastly different to what we've been taught. They want
different planets.
Yeah, so we got brought up in the whole like work-life balance. It's like work was first, life was second. They've been brought up with going, actually, it should be in equal parts. And I agree with that to a point. I don't think it was healthy that I was working 12 to 18-hour days. Where is my life in that? I end up just being Katie, the good salesperson. I don't become Katie, the fiance, Katie, whoever else I wanted to be, right? I had no opportunity for that. Their desires are different to ours, and asking them to work 12, 18-hour days and actually taking our mindset into that, which could be potentially a toxic mindset. I do think it's a toxic mindset, and putting that on these people, and they're like, I don't really care. I just come to work because I want to go out and to enjoy my life. Like, I want to have that work-life balance.
Employers do see it as, they don't have work ethic, and because the work ethic that millennials have, or baby boomers and everyone else, is completely different to Gen Z. Yeah, they might do have work ethic, but
it's different.
It's very different.
It's really different.
It is, yeah.
But if you think about it from this perspective as well, like, I worked really hard to make sure that I could afford to go out, buy a house, all that kind of stuff. Gen Z don't necessarily want that. Like, they might not be, I mean, I'm not saying everyone, because it's not fair to put a whole generation and say, everyone is like that. Yeah. So they just have different outlooks on life. And I think that with the Gen Z, I will say that most people that I work with, because I work with CEOs, MDs, leaders on a one-to-one basis, they're definitely not millennials, or I have some millennials, but I have more sort of Gen X's and baby boomers. I'm not lying. There are out there. It's completely different. The Gen Z, on the other hand, I think it's just trying to find out.
It's the new era.
It's a new era.
And we all have to adapt.
Yeah.
We must adapt because this is the future.
Yeah. I'm not going to lie. I moan about the Gen Z, but in my mind, I'm like, what a breath of fresh air. You coming in and being like, you don't have to work 12 to 18 hour days. I don't want to do this. Amazing.
And I think this is where you come in, and it's perfect because they bang on around mental health and all of that, and here you are talking about it, right?
It's also so with mental health though, I think there's got to be an understanding of mental health in the workplace and understanding what the company's role is and what the individual role is. And I think that's something that's really important when we talk about mental health. It's not just all workplaces have to take 100% of the onus of mental health, because that's not fair and that's really unrealistic. So there has to be an element of, this is what a company's responsibility is when it comes to mental health, and this is what it is. This is what the responsibility for the person and the individual. That's something that's there. And we've also got to understand mental health is on a scale. Some days it's going to be good and some days it's going to be bad. We also have to understand that mental health doesn't mean mental illness.
Yes.
And that's something that's incredibly different. When we're having bad mental health days, it's finding ways to manage that rather than just ignoring it and using escapism and all of that.
Can I ask you, what boundaries can someone put in order to avoid burnout?
It really depends on where their stress is coming from, right?
Yeah, okay. Let's say, I'll give myself for an example.
Okay.
I'm in recruitment, pressure job, pressurizing very high, sales, kind of 360. And there are days where I do feel low. There's no reason to feel low, but I think because it's such an extroverted job and naturally I'm an introvert, it feels like sometimes I put on a face to do that. And there are days where I just feel physically exhausted to get up and do the same thing over again and again. Even though I love what I do, I feel I need to put boundaries on that. So how can one put a boundary on specific areas of their job, for example?
Yeah. Let's start with I'll just tell you how I perceive boundaries. When I look at boundaries, I see it like a dome around me. I look at what are my emotions, my actions, and my behaviors. Where do they start and where do they end? And it's understanding that you have to, the first step with any type of boundary that you're setting, you have to become so self-aware of what makes you tick, what are your triggers, we're talking about triggers that motivate you, demotivate you, understanding what you need to make sure that you can show up as the best version of yourself. Everyone needs to take a bit of a step back and go, what do I need to make sure that I can actually show up as the best version of myself, and not use excuses of not using that as an excuse, but understanding I need this.
Yes.
And it can be, it's just, again, a scale. So that's the first step. If you are an introvert in a typically extroverted industry, you have to understand, again, if you're really exhausted one day, it's being able to look at your day and go, okay, what's a realistic day that I could actually achieve, to make sure that you're not like, I'm too tired, I'm going to do absolutely nothing. Because I don't agree with that, because that will never work in most industries, especially in sales. That won't work. So it's being able to take a step back and actually going, what does a realistic day look like for me? And I have this thing that I call like the rule or the power of 3. And so it's looking at your day and looking at the 3 things that you can absolutely focus on that's sort of fitting with where you are right now, but it's helping you get closer to your goal. Because you can't be 100% every day. That's just unrealistic. So you might have a day where you're feeling 50%. So when you're feeling 50%, what are the 3 things that you can do today that's going to make you feel a little bit better, or like to get you to so you can look at that. What do I need to do to increase my energy from, maybe you're at like 20%, maybe what can I do to increase my energy? And then the other thing is, if you're looking at your job, what are things that I can actually do today that, even if it's just 0.1% of getting a little bit closer to where you need to be, what can you do? So I think the boundary there with work is understanding yourself and understanding what you can realistically bring to the day, instead of just going, oh, I'm going to call in sick, or I'm not going to do that. I'm not saying that you shouldn't call in sick when you actually are sick. That's not what I'm saying. But we're never going to be like, it's unrealistic.
This is the thing. Loads of people do take sick leaves because they feel like, I just can't put in my 100% today. that's where they don't have a boundary.
That's where it's the all or nothing mentality.
Yes.
Like, I don't feel 100% every single day. That is just being a human being.
Yeah.
When I'm at, like, I think if you can average being like 70 to 80%, you're doing good. That means some days you're going to be at 80% and some days you're going to be at 50, 30%, whatever it is. And there's a very big difference from understanding, am I just a little bit tired because I've been too extroverted? I feel like my battery's a little bit drained and I need to take, maybe it's not about being in like back-to-back meetings for you. Maybe it's actually, what can I actually do? Maybe I need to do a candidate search. Maybe I need to do minimal amount of like candidate prep because maybe that's something that you do enjoy. I don't know. It's being
I've figured it out.
Yeah, but it's being able to figure out that. It's not about just stopping and doing nothing, going, I don't feel 100% today, so therefore I'm not going to come in. It's being able to understand, I don't feel 100% today because yesterday I was in 10 back-to-back meetings and my social battery is so drained. I'm emotionally a little bit drained. So what can I actually do today that is, one, going to build up my battery, and two, allow me to get a little bit closer to my goal so I can still, because I have this theory. I feel like everybody can relate to this. As human beings, we do want to achieve.
Yes.
Like we are literally created. If we just go back to hunter-gatherer times, I get really passionate about this, as you can tell. If we go back to hunter-gatherer times, it wasn't just we were 100% in life or death situations all the time, right? We just were. We had pressure to help us achieve what we wanted to achieve. For instance, if we woke up and we're cold, okay, go find shelter. If we're thirsty, go find water. If we're hungry, go find food. And when we did that, we got that dopamine hit where it was like, high five, look at what I've been able to do. And just look at how humans have evolved. Like, we've achieved so much from having that kind of mentality. Every single human being wants to feel productive. Every single human being does want to feel like they're achieving something. That can look vastly different to other people, but I do think there is that element. And I don't think it is healthy for people just to go, I'm not feeling great today, I'm going to do 100% nothing. Do not get me wrong. I have my days when I'm really sick and I'm going to go watch. I'm going to binge watch some Netflix. I'm not talking about those days. I'm talking about the days where I wake up and I still have anxiety. So instead of going, I'm not going to do anything today because I'm anxious, I look at it going, what's going to help me manage this a bit better?
Right.
What actions can I take that's going to help me move a little bit forward while I'm honoring the fact that I'm anxious? And so it's fighting my anxiety, accept it, I'm living with it, but what can I do today to live with it?
So with that being said, there's also a fine line of losing your sense of purpose.
Yeah.
And how can we make sure we don't lose our sense of purpose? Because if we're finding excuses and we don't want to go into work and we feel terrible, we just want to stay in bed, whatever, there is a fine line there of losing your sense of purpose in a way. So how can you basically avoid that to get back to normal?
I feel like sense of purpose can be linked into mental health and mental being, but a sense of purpose doesn't have to be this grand, big thing. It doesn't have to be, this is my purpose in life.
It can always change.
And it can change. So I think sometimes, for instance, when I was really burnt out, and I'm saying so sick, I was so sick and I physically could no longer do my job. Physically, mentally, and emotionally couldn't do my job. But I still had bills to pay. I still had to do things like that. What I did was I scaled down my purpose. I was like, my purpose right now is to make sure that I feel good. And what things can I do while having a job can I do to feel good? And I worked in a couple of part-time jobs. I did a couple of different things, but my purpose was to get better and my purpose was to enjoy that. And I think when we're looking at purpose as human beings, we put this existential crisis element on having to have this giant purpose 100% of our life. It's no, if you're feeling a little bit drained, maybe your purpose at the moment is like, I don't want to feel that way. I'm going to start putting some better things in place. I feel good about that. So your job doesn't have to be a purpose. It doesn't have to be your life. It can just be I need to get this done because I have to pay my bills. I've got to do that. I've had jobs like that. That's what it is. Like, I need to keep this job. I enjoy it in this element. It gives me the space to do what I need to do. And I think that when it comes to big purposes, you'll find people, because like I said, I work with the high achievers, I work with the type A's of the world. Most of them are really driven by one purpose and they forget about everything else. And what happens is all those everything else is getting in the way because they're not physically feeling well. They can't concentrate. Maybe they've got their relationships have started to diminish and all that stuff. We've got to fix that so they can work towards their purpose.
Right.
And that becomes a little bit of a purpose. Okay, I need to focus on these things so I can focus on my bigger overall purpose.
And so in the beginning of doing the episode, you said that burnout might take years.
Yep.
I didn't know that.
Here's the thing. So I'll give you an example of what I mean. So I definitely started creating habits of burnout when I was a teenager, young adult, right? When I entered university, probably in my final year at school, I started creating the habits where it was like sacrifice my sleep, work really hard. Like I really did do that. God, when I was at uni, I started my business. I was working. But you think about what happened when I was at school and uni. I'd go to school for whatever the term length was. It might be like 3-4 months. Then I'd have a month break, go back for 3-4 months, then have 3 months break. And so I had this whole element that I'd get to the end of the year. Do not get me wrong. At the end of every university year, I was so unwell. I had the shingles 4 times. I had kidney stones 1 time. I had the flu that didn't go away for 6 weeks. And I'm an Australian at summer, so it's just awful. Like I had these things, but I wouldn't have said that was burnout. But when I 100% burnt out was when I went into recruitment for the first 2 years. And so if I go back in time and I look at the habits that I set and how I managed my stress or didn't manage my stress, I created those habits way back many years before. I just probably created an environment where I never 100% burnt out because I was doing this cyclical thing where it was like pretty close, then take a break, pretty close, then took a break. And that's where the problem is.
Yeah, it makes sense now.
But people, it can take years. You look at working mums. They are some of the most burnt out people you will find on this planet. The most, because women are more likely to burn out than men. That's just a fact. I'm not saying men don't burn out. Do not hear what I'm not saying. But women burn out at a higher rate than men, and working mums burn out at a higher rate than most people. Yeah.
How long does it take to recover from burnout, and what help can we get in order to recover faster?
Yeah. Step 1, prevention is the best medicine. So do not burn out. So make sure that you're putting things in place where you are taking care of yourself. And I'll go through the 3 pillars in a sec, but that's the prevention part. But you asked, how do you overcome it and how long? The latest research says it takes 11 weeks to overcome burnout, but that's just taking an average of probably a small portion of people that they've been able to follow who are burnt out, who even knew what burnout was, right? That's one thing. Me personally, the first time I burnt out, it took 8 months the first time. The second time it took me 12 to 18 months to get back to really real normal. So it's really different for every single person, but it's also what can you do to overcome burnout? So some people, I was very fortunate where I could take time off work. And so I didn't have to work my full-time job. I could live at home and work part-time and do all that kind of stuff. So I was able to increase my ability to shorten that time of my recovery, right? Even though it took me 8 months to 8 months, then 12 to 18 months the second time. So it really depends on where you're at, and it really depends on what things you're putting in place to actually help you manage.
Do it fast.
How to overcome, because at the end of the day, it's not just I'm going to take some time off, I feel physically better. Because that's what people do. They take time off, they feel physically better, then they go back and do it again.
Yeah. So what are the 3 pillars you mentioned?
So with Get Your Shit Together, I had to look at the 3 pillars that will absolutely help you either prevent burnout or overcome burnout, and the 3 areas that you have to focus on. So the first pillar is you have to physically become more resilient. And when we look at the physical side, we're looking at good habits. So we're looking at the first thing that you have to do is make sure you're getting enough sleep. Most people that I speak to that are burnt out have either sacrificed sleep, or they've got really bad sleeping habits, or maybe they've started to have insomnia, because that's the hardest part. The minute you get insomnia, it is really hard to overcome burnout. And I can talk a little bit more about that if you want to. First things first, make sure that you are making sleep a priority. For guys, you need 7 to 9 hours of sleep, good quality sleep. For women, you need 8 to 10 hours of good quality sleep. So that's the first thing. Focus on your sleep. The second thing is make sure you do some exercise. Get outside, get some fresh air, do all that kind of stuff. Make sure that you do eat healthy foods as well. Stress has a really profound impact on your physical being. So you need to put things in place that's going to help mitigate that impact. Sleep, diet, exercise are the 3 ways you're going to help either mitigate the impact or actually increase that resilience towards stress as well. I could go into so much detail about that, but I know we've only got an hour. So that's the first pillar. The second pillar is you have to become mentally resilient. And when we're looking at mental resilience, and this is the hard part because I remember thinking I was really mentally resilient because I could stand in the face of stress and just push through, but it took a massive toll on me. So when we're looking at mental resilience, we're looking at the ability to put appropriate stress management techniques in to make sure that you are managing stress more effectively. And that can look differently to every single person. However, it's the first thing that you've got to do when you're looking at mental resilience and managing your stress is looking at how do I manage stress and is it effective? So a lot of people, what they do is when we're looking at managing stress, they use escapism, they use other outlets, there's so many different ways to look at the ineffective coping mechanisms of stress. I did every single one of them. The one that I see the most common is the toxic positivity, which is where you're really stressed out and you'll recognize that you're really stressed out. And then what you do is you do one of two things. You go, at least I'm not as bad as someone. Or you go, I don't want to feel negative, so I'm just going to focus on all the positives. And what I find with those people is that 95% of their life can be on fire and they'll be like, so like their whole house could be on fire and they look out their window, at least my neighbor's house is on fire. It's, what are you doing? That's not going to help you. You need to turn around and put out your own fire. So that's the one piece there. And that's a massive mindset shift. So that's a really big one. Then the third pillar is making sure, because I work with business owners, it's making sure your business makes sense to you. So if you're a business owner and you're burnt out, building a business to make sure that, because if you're burnt out, the likelihood of the people in your company are burnt out is quite high. There's a trickle-down effect. Making sure that you've created a business that's sustainable, where everyone has the opportunity to manage their stress. You have the opportunity to manage your stress and work more effectively. And that's definitely the third pillar. And you can go into like employees as well. So if you're listening to this and you don't run your own business, it's looking at how do you work the most efficiently and effectively? What boundaries, as we talked about before, what boundaries do you need to put in place to make sure that you can show up as the best version of yourself, perform at a high level sustainably rather than just doing these short bursts.
Katie, I love that. That was very insightful. And I love how you basically got so burnt out, you ended up monetizing from this, opening up a business and everything. So like only very few people would go through shit and then be like, you know what? I can teach people something from this.
Yeah.
And I love the drive that you have. So for our listeners and our viewers, where can they find you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active. So just Google Katie Maycock and I should pop up. We could type in Get Your Shit Together and I guarantee I'll pop up. I've also got an Instagram, which is also getyourshittogether.io. So if you type in getyourshittogether.io, you will find me. You can go over to, so I've got two websites. I'm going to have to make this up. The first one.
I think maybe you need to put it into one.
I can't. I had to split it into two.
Okay.
So because I've been working with enterprise businesses, they don't like the word shit. Right. So I relaunched another business called Gist Wellbeing, which is to cater for the corporate companies that are like HR people. I'm like, shit, like business owners, directors, leaders do not hate the word shit. But so you can find, if you're a corporate company and you're looking at it from, you want me to come into your organization to do work with your teams, go to Gist Wellbeing. So Gist is literally the acronym for Get Your Shit Together. So GYST wellbeing.com. There has a whole list of all the services I provide for companies, but you can also go to www.getyourshittogether.io. That's for the individual.
Okay. Katie, thank you so much for coming. It's been very insightful, very informative, and I'll see you guys next week. Thank you.